Today's interview with Vietnam-era veteran Frank Bierline is taking place at the Chemung County Historical Society in Elmira, New York. Mr. Bierline is 60 years old, having been born on September 22, 1942. He served in the United States Air Force from July 27, 1960 to July 26, 1968. Frank currently resides at 28 High Haven Road, Pine City, New York. My name is Marlene Zecca, and I volunteered to interview Frank Bierline as part of the Veterans History Project. Our camera operator today is Heather Wade. There, that takes care of that formality. So I was wondering if maybe we could start with when you enlisted. Were you drafted?
No, I actually enlisted in July, right after school was out, and went on to Lackland from there. But I enlisted.
You did.
Yes.
Were you concerned about the draft, or is it just that was just something you
No,
felt
it was
that you
something
wanted to do?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you select the Air Force?
Yes.
Is that was?
Yeah, I was interested in aircraft, airplanes, and you got your choice of what you wanted to do when you enlisted, and I picked aircraft maintenance field, and I was lucky enough to get it. So it was good.
Yeah. So that did you have like a boot camp and a training?
Yes, we went through 5 weeks of boot camp, and basically we had it much easier than the other services, the Army and the Marines especially, and the Navy too, have a really tough boot camp, but the Air Force is more laid back, more relaxed. It's tough for a couple of weeks, and then they ease up on you once they determine you're going to make it, that you're going to get through it. So the difficult part was that it was so warm down there because it was in July and it was in Texas, so it was really hot, and the exercising and the drills and things were extremely warm. But
so were the first 2 weeks primarily just a lot of physical, or was the whole thing?
The whole thing.
Was pretty much.
It was a lot of training. We didn't go. It wasn't classroom training. It was drill training.
Right.
And what the Air Force is about, and the policies that you would be following, things like that. Right. And then on your off hours, when you weren't doing the training parts, you would be doing marching or calisthenics or field marches, things like that.
Did they teach you how to use firearms?
Yes.
Is that part of the?
Yes.
That was part of the training too.
Yes. Okay. We just had rifles. We didn't get into. Well, they didn't have the high-tech weapons they have today, but we basically used M1 and M2 carbines.
Right.
That's what we were trained on. We didn't have pistols. The Air Police, the police part of our group had pistols, but we just used rifles, and we weren't assigned a rifle. You would check it out when you went to the firing range, shoot it, and turn it back in. So we didn't have a gun.
So you didn't have to clean it or go through all of that?
We learned how to do it, but we didn't do them ourselves.
So you're about 18 years old at the time when you enlisted?
Just short of 17, or just short of 18.
18.
Yeah.
You completed high school.
Yeah.
Right. And where are you from originally?
I completed high school in Watkins Glen, New York, and I'm originally from close to Pittsburgh. When I was, we moved up into New York when I was 16.
Okay.
So I finished school here and then went directly into the service.
Was there anything else that you can remember about Lakeland? Anything about your instructors or any guys you met there, and any stories?
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning. One of the, I don't remember their names, of course. I have pictures and everything, but one of the second in command drill instructor was a black man, and he was huge, and he was just he was a terror for the young troops, you know. Yeah. And they had, I think, later, I didn't think about it at the time, but I think later he was a plant. Yeah. Because he acted out and did all kinds of things and got into trouble all the time. And then one day they just come in and grabbed him and took him out. and you heard all these noises like they were beating him up and stuff like that out in the
Oh
in the
my
next
gosh.
room, and they never saw him again. So I think, you know,
Oh.
that, and it was to keep everybody in line. You know,
I
I think,
see.
but I think later, I'm pretty sure he was a plant.
Yeah.
He was an instructor
Oh,
doing
I see.
this, but he stayed. Excuse me. He stayed with us for about a week,
Uh-huh.
and before they took him out. So,
Were they known to do that as far as you could tell? You
well, I
remember?
don't know. but-
Yeah, he was just the one
Yeah,
time.
and you were kind of stuck in your little group of maybe 50 or 60 men.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't get into other groups. You all stayed right together. You marched together, went to lunch together, and dinner together, and so you didn't get to talk to any other groups. You know, so you're isolated.
Okay.
And so this guy probably, that was his job,
Yeah,
to
he
go around
probably
different
rotated,
groups and
yeah.
get thrown out of every group. You know,
Yeah.
to keep everybody straight.
Yeah.
But
How many would be in the group?
about 50 or 60. I'm not sure, but there was a two-story barracks, and part of it downstairs was administration office for the boss, you know,
Right.
for the leader, and the rest were recruits, and then upstairs was full of recruits, and they had, of course, bathrooms up and down and all that kind of things. But I think it was between 50 and 60 in our group.
So did you have any free time at all during was it 6 weeks that you were at Lakeland?
Yeah.
I mean, any free time to just break away from the base and go out and...
The only time we got off the base was around the 5th week, towards the middle of the 5th week. They took us to a baseball game. Loaded us all in a bus, took us down to downtown and to a baseball game, and then brought us back. That was it.
That was it.
Otherwise, you were either out working, you know, marching, or doing your exercising, or in school, or at lunch, or whatever.
So you must have been in pretty good shape by the end of the 6 weeks.
Well, I actually gained 20 pounds. But I was skin and bones when I went in, and you ate a lot more because you were exercising.
Right.
But
How was the food?
it was actually really good. I always felt bad for the other military services because the Air Force treated the men right. They had excellent food, and even when we went out on our field trips, we didn't stay overnight. We just went out early in the morning, marched out there, stayed all day, and came back in the dark, marched back. We had to march, it was maybe 5 miles. And even the food, they brought a truck out with all this hot
Cater.
food. And, yeah, it's just like, yeah. So, and we had cake and, you know, everything. So
Yeah.
it was a full meal. So just like at home, you know, home cooked.
Yeah.
So it was good. We really had it well. Very easy as far as that goes.
So where did this take you then from Lakeland? Where did you go from there? Did you get to pick an assignment, or
No,
was it?
what they do is they put you through basic training, and which is learning how the Air Force operates and your physical conditioning, and then they send you off to school, whatever career you've chosen, or they assign you to. So I went to Amarillo in northern, up in the Panhandle, almost in the Panhandle, I think. And I went to aircraft school, jet aircraft school. And it was, I think, 13 weeks that I was there, learning the basic skills of airplanes,
Right.
how they work, and
How
how to take care of
regimented
them.
was that experience compared to the boot camp sort of thing?
It was a lot more relaxed. You went to school all day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week. Just like going to college, except we were just in one class all day because we were just learning one subject. And then after class was over, you marched to class and stayed there all day, and then marched back, and then you would have lunch at school, of course, and then when you got back to your barracks, you would have your evening meal, and then you were free to do whatever you wanted to in your area. You couldn't go off the base or out of your, what they call them, quadrangles. They were squares with barracks, 3- and 4-story barracks all around it. So, and there was other outfits, were in our group, in our training group. I don't remember the name of our group, but there was maybe 5 or 6 groups in that. It was like a block of buildings.
So the class that you took, were you with the same, I presume they're all men at this point,
Yes.
the same group, I mean the same people, day after day, taking the same course?
Yes,
There was-
but it wasn't the same people at boot camp, of course, because
Right.
they could have gone to
They-
any school.
Exactly, but once you got into this situation, then again, you were limited as far as
Who you
your
could see.
exposure, who you could see.
Yes.
You were in this group situation again, confined with a group. So you weren't able to get off the base at all?
I don't
During the
think
13 weeks, there
I
was
don't think
no-
so. I don't think I got off the base once.
I mean, they pretty much controlled that, or is it just,
You had to have a special pass to get off. You had to have a really good reason, not I want to go to town this weekend or anything like
Right.
that. You had to have a good reason, like sickness in the family,
right.
something like that, to get off the
Yeah.
base.
So
they
you
wanted
weren't
you
able-
to be controlled.
Yeah, so,
And you were being taught marching skills again, because you marched back and forth everywhere you went. You could circulate in that
Quadrangle?
quadrangle that we were in, into other groups, things like that. But
Mhm.
I didn't do it very much because there was a lot of studying to do too.
Mhm.
We had homework,
right,
and you had to get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning
right,
to get your drill work done, and then
go on to class.
march on to class. And it was half-hour march to class, I think, and that was intentional
Yeah,
too, because they wanted the group to be able to work together.
right. So the classes you took, was this all on all airplane maintenance, all different types of airplanes?
No, actually, it's
Or-
career field related. You pick a career, like airplanes, for instance, and then you may get to pick what you work on. So my career field was 43. It was several numbers and letters together, but 43 indicated 1 or 2 engine fighter bomber. So that's the only thing I was trained to work on. So I couldn't work on Air Force One, for instance, because
Right.
it's 4 engine and it's not a fighter bomber.
Right,
But I could work on any small bomber or any fighter plane with 1 or 2 engines.
right,
And I actually worked on at one time a small passenger plane that was 2 engine. And I guess that was allowable.
mhm,
So, and then they had some of the other digits in it, in this number, which was your career field, was the rank that you held within that career field. So if you take additional tests and learning, you would advance through these, almost like a rank.
right,
You would advance through these different classes, and they would change your number. So mine was, started out as 43131C and went to 43151C and then 43171C as I advanced in my knowledge of maintenance.
right. So, do they provide any entertainment then at all? You had maybe some free time on a Sunday per chance, or was that?
Not really.
No.
You kept you pretty busy.
Yeah,
Yeah. If you and then there was KP. They always
Oh.
want people for KP or for guard duty or just whatever,
Oh,
just to
okay.
keep you busy.
Yeah.
The main thing was to keep you busy, and so you didn't have time to get into trouble.
So, did they have the latrine crew too, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you had to do everything.
Everything.
Yeah, they didn't have any house cleaners.
Laundry?
You did your own laundry.
You did your own laundry,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah. So you were self-supporting. And the old saying was they gave you $100 and took back 80. That's because you had to pay for whatever you had done. They gave us in boot camp, going into boot camp, they gave us, I think, $60. But you had to buy all this stuff from the PX.
PX.
And you come out of there with about $3 left. So they knew how much it was going to cost, and
Sure.
that's how much they gave you.
Right,
And,
Right.
but you didn't need money, so it was
Yeah.
okay.
yeah.
That was fine.
But in Amarillo here, like to get laundry done, you had to pay to have it done? Or is it just buying personal items out of the KP? Is that?
We actually did our own there, but once I got away from the tech school and got into other assignments, then you would pay for it, or they had sometimes laundry things in the barracks where you could do your own laundry. But at boot camp and at school, you did your own thing.
Right.
Did your own work.
Is there anything about school now that you recollect, any stories or anything? Any pranks? Did you guys play pranks on one another?
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean,
this will be later, but one of the times we were marching back, and it was a special occasion, and some of the higher officers in the group were reviewing the troops, and they were on a stand, and they were up, so your eyes were about at knee level, so they could see out over the top of all these troops coming by, and there were groups of them. You know, there were our group, our class, and I think they formed up 2 or 3 classes into a group and marched them through, and there were maybe 20 groups ahead of us and 10 or 15 behind us, all going down here, and there would be maybe 10 feet between each group, with the leader walking in front, marching in front.
Right.
And we had just passed, so I didn't get to see it, but we had just passed the grandstand, and when you go past the grandstand, they would give you the order to eyes left, or whichever side the officers were on.
Right.
And so you would eyes left to the grandstand, and to the men, to the officers. And all of us, after we passed, and the next group or the second group were coming by, we heard this yelling and noises, you know, and what happened was one of the troops had a camera, and he had it in his pocket, and as he walked by, he was somewhere in the center, apparently, where he thought he would get away with it, and he pulled his camera out and was taking a picture of the officers and so he was not marching properly.
Right.
They got him. So they were yelling at him, and, you know, went out and got him and all that stuff. So we didn't know him, but we heard about it later, what happened. You know? So it was funny.
Did you hear what happened to him?
No.
I mean, no. It's just that he was out of step there, huh?
Yeah.
So then where did it take you from there after your the schooling?
Yeah, after schooling, I got orders. Usually they give you orders for your next assignment just maybe a month or so before your current assignment is over. And sometimes they wait until the last minute. So in my case, they waited until the last minute. I had orders to go to, I believe it was South Carolina.
Now you weren't able to like choose or prioritize where you wanted to go in any way? You could make a request.
Yeah, but no guarantees.
Right.
So I had these orders to go, I think it was South Carolina, somewhere. And they usually give you about 50 or 60 copies because you had to hand them to everyone. Every time you go out through a doorway, practically, you had to give somebody your orders so they know that you're going the right direction. Right. And so I assumed that's where I was going, and then so I didn't need shots for overseas. So about 2 weeks before, maybe less than that, before the school was out, they said, "Oh, sorry, you're going to Okinawa instead. Here's your new orders."
Wow.
And they said, "You'll get 30 days vacation, leave time. And during that time, you need to get these shots for overseas." So I said, okay. So I took the paper and got the bus. I rode the bus from Texas then to New York on a bus ticket. And on the way, I was reading these orders and going through my papers and things. It took a day and a half, I think, to get there. And I all of a sudden realized that I needed 13 shots. I had 30 days to get them.
So they didn't provide the shots?
Oh, it was too late. They couldn't arrange it, because I was just,
But if it wasn't, if the timing had been it had occurred, their decision earlier, they would have provided the shots
Yes.
at the,
Yes.
in Amarillo at the base?
Yes.
There, okay, all right, so now you were left on your own to go get your shots.
So I was on my own. So I had to go to an Air Force or an Army base to get them. Otherwise, I'd have had to pay for them, or maybe I couldn't have even found the shots I needed.
Right.
But any military base would have them. So I went to Sampson Air Force Base, which was open then.
Is that up in Romulus?
Yeah, it's close to Romulus. And I got the shots up there. And since I drove up, I had to get them all at once, so I got 7 in one arm and 6 in the other. Because I had to have them, and you know, so I was sore for a day.
Any other side effects from those shots, or
No,
just
just sore arms. And I don't even know what they were,
Yeah.
but you had to carry your shot record with you at all times, so they just started stamping, you know. And then, so then I went to, took a plane to California and caught the banana boat, I called it, to Okinawa. It was a C-54 transport plane, 4-engine, propeller driven. And it took a long time to get there. But I called it a banana boat because half the front half of the back half of the plane was filled with troops, you know, passenger seats, and a lot of it was a military plane. It was a military / civilian kind of thing. I think they were maybe hauling for the government. And the front of the plane was full of bananas. So we had the banana smell the whole way. And there was no, I mean, there was no dividing. There was just
Right.
strapped down cargo and then seats.
Yeah.
So, and I had the group name, I believe it was the 18th Fire Wing, or 18th Maintenance Division. Yeah, Maintenance Division. So I spent the next year and a half pretty much in a hangar, overhauling or repairing.
Planes.
Yeah, every so often they come in for a major revamping, adding new things and replacing engines, things like that. That's what it is.
The planes that came in, do you know where they were coming from? Like
Oh, they were actually planes on the base.
on the base?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that their time would come for replacement. A lot of the parts on them have to be replaced after a certain amount of time. Like the ejection seats have cartridge shells in them, like shotgun shells that fire the seat out. That tighten the seat belt, thing like that. Things like that when you eject. Those have to be replaced. So, and any problems that were written up when the plane was flying, that's the kind of things we did.
Yeah. So you were there for, you say, a year?
18 months.
18 months, a year and a
Yeah.
half.
And I also went to school while I was there. You know, I took advanced training and things on the base.
So they continued to
Yeah.
provide the
Yes.
training so that
Yes.
you could. Did that increase your rank then as the more training you received, or?
It helped with the rank. You could go through the training in anticipation of that helping you get promoted, but it was no guarantee. It was all in performance, and training then was a big part of it, but because it would help your performance, but it was no guarantee that you'd be promoted.
So, what was life on Okinawa like then? I mean, is it?
It was the first time that in the service that I was able to do things on my own. You know, go out and not tell anybody where I was going.
Okay.
As long as I showed up for work
Right.
in uniform, and if I was selected for any special thing like KP, or if I had to go to the dentist or for a checkup, as long as I showed up at the point where I was supposed to show up on time and everything, then the rest of the time I could do whatever I wanted to. I could go off the base. We had badges to get in and out of the base with. When you go through the gate, show your badge and go out. And once you're off the base, you could do anything you wanted to do.
So did you meet any of the local people, or were you still kind of?
Yeah, I I got a motorcycle over there, so I could get around, and that's where I got interested in motorcycles, because it was really cheap transportation for the local people. So there's a lot of motorcycle shops, and it was cheap for us too. And it was fun. You could go a lot of places you couldn't go with a car. So, and a lot of the Okinawa is beaches and narrow roads and dirt roads, so it made it very nice to be able to get around. And we formed groups and would go on trips and things like that. The only thing they did was the Air Force said don't go to I think the south end of the island, because there was a lot of communist activity down there.
I was going to say, would you have concern for your safety,
Yeah.
you know?
So they said stay away from that part of the island, otherwise you'll be fine.
Right.
So,
And that proved to be true then,
Yes.
as far as your...
in fact, on Christmas Day, I don't know what year it was, it must have been '61, three of us took 3 motorcycles and went around the island, except that we cut off the communist part. We just drove across,
Right.
and then went around the rest of the island. Took us a day and a half, and we had to drive on beaches, and we wanted to see the water the entire way around, except for the part we couldn't go into. And we got one flat tire and things like that. But
was it easy to find gas? Well, you could probably do your own maintenance, but I mean, as far as doing a trip like that, were there...
Yeah, you had to be careful. Also, I had a 4-cycle engine, and a lot of the Japanese motorcycles then were 2-cycle, so they'd use oil and the gas, and it was pre-mixed, so you could ride up to the gas pump and you get your pre-mix right there. So if you went up there to get gas with mine, you just took regular gasoline. You'd have to watch them really close, because they wouldn't realize it, and they would put the wrong kind of gas in. So you had to stand right there and say, no, this. But they were pretty friendly, and I had motorcycle work done downtown, had the engine overhauled, things like that.
Were there any communication problems? I mean, was it difficult? Did they understand English? I don't know what their native tongue is, but...
Yeah, it's Japanese. I think it's a subset or whatever, because they've been separated for a while, but they spoke Japanese, and but most of them spoke English. It would be rare to find someone that you couldn't communicate with in English.
Right.
And then after you're over there 6 months, you learn 20 or 30 words, and you can get along just fine. You can.
Do you remember any of those words now and what they stood for? Could you?
Some of them, and they're fading, but some of them I'm not sure of the meaning of them anymore. But I can't come up with any right now.
Yeah, that's okay. I just was wondering if you had any.
Yeah.
So what happened then from Okinawa?
From Okinawa, I took another vacation. Then when I came back, I didn't take vacation or leave for the time I was over there. And then when I came back, I was assigned to Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. So I flew directly home.
Now, is this a request, or is it just that periodically they just reassign people so that they don't stay in one area for very long?
On overseas tours, there's a limit. So, and it depends on the conditions of the assignment. So, for instance, Okinawa, it's 18 months. Now, if I wanted to stay longer, I could request to stay longer, and they would have considered that. Some guys did. And then some tours are what they call remote, and they're maybe 1 year. And I don't think there's any under a year. So if you get a remote tour and it's 1 year, that's a pretty tough place to live. I mean, severe something, weather or whatever, that makes it. Or maybe if you're married, you can't take your wife. So they restrict that to just a year.
Were you married at this time?
No, not. I got married when I was at Scott, at Scott Air Base. I was there 3.5 years, and it was a training outfit. The outfit I was in was a pilot training outfit, and I had 2-seat planes, and they were easy to work on. They were real nice, and nice pilots, and you'd see the same ones over and over.
So you got to know the pilots
Yes.
pretty well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there was still schooling going on then, even
Right.
then. So that was the first time that I had actually flight line duty before I was in the hangar or in the classroom. So at Scott, I actually got my two of my own airplanes that I had to take care of.
Oh.
And if a problem came up that I couldn't do, like sheet metal work, we didn't do sheet metal work, and we didn't do electronic work. We did the mechanical kind of
Right.
work. Then I would have to schedule it in to the hangar
For
or
those other.
for maintenance, or call a sheet metal man to come out and fix the plane, whatever.
But basically, you were responsible for overseeing any of the maintenance, as well as, I mean, doing all the mechanical maintenance, but if anything else, you were responsible for making sure arrangements were made
Yes.
to,
Mhm.
so you had a pretty close relationship then with the pilots to,
Yeah, and the schedule would come out on when your plane was going to fly. And if you couldn't have it ready, if there was something wrong with it, you had to let them know so they could reschedule
Mhm.
and take a different airplane. But usually it was far enough in advance, you had time to schedule in maintenance and everything, so you
Mhm.
could get it done. You just had to, if you had two or more, some guys had three,
Mhm.
if they were more experienced,
right.
they might have 3 planes to take care of, so.
Now, I guess by this time the Vietnam War was going on. Did you have any fears or concerns about being assigned into a war area? Would that have been?
I didn't worry too much about it, but I think I would have been worried a little bit. But I think I've been safe enough because the Air Force is going to protect their planes, and I didn't do any flying
Mhm.
as a regular rule, so I would have been as safe as the airplanes, and they would really protect the airplanes. I
Right.
mean, not that they wouldn't protect the troops, but
Right.
some of the troops had to go out and carry weapons. I was never issued a weapon that I kept on my person, so I felt really safe, especially like in Okinawa, where we were facing down China at that time, and that's why that base was there. And we weren't worried about it, even though we had planes ready to go. Every second of the day, they were ready to go. We didn't worry about it. It was just not something we worried about, I guess.
Right. So you were 3 years in Illinois.
Yeah, 3.5.
3.5.
And then I got married there. That was one of the better places, especially after we were married. We lived off base then. We got an apartment downtown. But the barracks were nice. The food was good. You didn't have to eat in the barracks or in the mess hall if you didn't want to. And again, you were free after you got off work. If you didn't have any special assignment, you were free to do whatever you wanted to. You could go downtown or go to the next state or go home over the weekend or whatever. If you weren't scheduled to work, you were free, just like a civilian job.
Right, so as long as you met your obligations, then you didn't have to worry
Right.
about your free time was yours. And you had a little more free time, I take it now, quite a
Yes,
bit more
yeah.
than previous experiences.
And then I got my orders for Iceland. And it kind of, I didn't mind going there because I had had easy assignments until then, and I thought, well, maybe it's my turn to get a bad assignment, you know. I was hoping for Germany or someplace, but so I went to Iceland and I was there for a year, and I took one leave while I was there, 30 days.
Now, your wife wasn't with you at this time?
No, she stayed in Pennsylvania, and she was pregnant, and our first son was born while I was in Iceland.
Yeah. That must have been kind of hard not to be able to be there.
Well, not only that, but he had problems breathing, and he was in the hospital a lot, and it was kind of irritating because the Red Cross normally would handle getting the parent home for that time, set it up and everything. And I don't know who made the decision, but the Red Cross and the service came back and said, well, if he dies, you can go home.
Wow.
But, so I didn't go.
Oh boy.
So, it was strange.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty rough. I don't think a lot of people realize sometimes, even though you don't see combat, you do make sacrifices.
Yeah.
So what was Iceland like?
Yeah.
Cold?
Very cold.
Barren? Desolate? Or?
Yeah, it was cold. It was probably, I remember the warmest it got in the entire year was 41 degrees. But most of the time it was below freezing. Every night it was below freezing. Mm-hmm. And the area where our barracks was built is in the middle of a field with lava rocks. Mm-hmm. So these black rocks all over the place, and then grass, no trees.
No trees, no nothing, vegetation other than
nothing,
grass.
just grass. It's the only thing that had a long enough cycle to grow. Uh-huh. And in other parts of the island, they had trees and big cities and Icelandic people there, of course. But we were pretty restricted. It was a Navy base, and we just had a small section of a couple hangars and our fighter planes. And we were responsible for chasing the Russian planes away. So we had the flight training, and the pilots have to fly a certain amount of hours per month to keep themselves current on their license and their flying. So we had 8 or 10 planes that were ready to fly all the time. And then we had 4 in the alert barn, which was down at the end of the runway, ready to go to intercept Russian planes. And then I worked up in the hangar, which was unheated, by the way.
It was not heated?
Not heated. And but the planes were sitting outside, so they only went into the hangar if they needed maintenance to get out of the wind and stuff like that. And so most of our work was outside, right on the ramp, and the wind was just nonstop, just constantly. And we had parkas and boots and gloves, and you couldn't work with your gloves on. Some of the things you had to do, so you'd take your gloves off, do it real quick, get them back on.
Wow.
And we had these heaters we had a trailer, like a semi-truck trailer, as a camp out there, close to the runway, close to the airplanes. And we had this, they call it a salamander heater. It's got about a 10-inch hose on it and some kind of heater on the other end, and it'd blow air through this hose, and we had it sticking in the door of this building to keep it warm. And that's our only heat. And but it was fun. I liked the work, and had a lot of good experiences there. And then if they would fly 2 airplanes out of the alert barn, if a Russian plane would come by, they would fly 2 planes to intercept it. And then, but if more than one Russian plane came along, then they would fire 4 planes out. And when the second set took off, we had to go out. If we were in the barracks, the horn goes off, or if we were at work, they would call us and say, we need more planes. So we'd have to go out and tow 2 more planes, or maybe 4 more planes with tugs down there, 5 miles down to the alert barn.
Yeah.
And they would have to be planes that were ready to go when we got there. So they had to be fueled and everything. So we had to keep them all fueled and everything just perfect, ready to go, as if the pilot was going to be there in a minute.
Right.
So
these were all fighter planes then?
Yeah, and they were F-102s. Very nice plane, nice to work on.
They would have been jet type planes.
Oh yes. Yeah. And they're the ones that had they're single engine. They had air operated rocket pods, so that when the pilot would pull the trigger to shoot, the belly would open up as part of pulling the trigger. The belly would open up, it would fire rockets out of there as long as he held the trigger, and then it would close up again. So that as soon as he released the trigger, they would close again. And that made the airplane more streamlined and kept the rockets out of the weather, and they were stacked behind each other in long tubes and they'd fire the front ones, and the next ones would go.
Would
So,
just automatically
yeah,
take its place.
yeah. Well, they would actually fire from wherever they were located. So as each one came out, they had a longer barrel to go through.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and I didn't get involved in loading them or anything, but that's what they
Yeah.
told me. That's how they worked.
Yeah.
We had to just be careful to stay out of the way of those doors. If they opened on the ground,
On the
they'd
ground.
kill you.
Oh, wow.
Because they opened really
really
fast.
fast.
Yeah.
Then the rocket drops out.
It would just come out just like a gun barrel. As the doors opened, you would see, if you were standing in front of the plane when they opened up,
Like a barrel comes
you
down.
would see like 4 or 5, maybe 6 tubes.
Okay.
And the
rockets
rockets
are
were
in those
inside there, and
tubes.
they'd come flying right out the front. And like I say, then if the first one was 3 feet long,
Right.
then the second one would have a 3-foot barrel to go through.
Right.
And the second one would have a 6-foot barrel to go through.
Right.
And I don't know, there were 24 or 34 rockets.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
Per
Yeah.
plane.
Yeah.
So it was kind of interesting, and they used them to. We had pictures. The pilots would take their pictures if they would intercept a Russian plane. They would fly alongside of it and take pictures.
Yeah.
So, and we never flew more than less than 2 planes on an intercept, because it could help the first pilot if he got into trouble.
Sure.
So one pilot would get on one side of the plane, or up close to the Russian plane, and the other one get out for a ways and take a picture of the 2 of them.
Yeah.
You know, so we had postcards and things with pictures on it of Russian planes and
our
fighter
planes. Yeah. Yeah. Any challenges with keeping those planes going during that time? Any times where you had some difficult problems to keep them running, or anything in
Their
particular?
jet engines are pretty good because they use 10-weight oil, and they crank easily. The only problem with getting one started is supplying the air, and they're started with they have an air starter. So you have a small cart that you haul around that has a small jet engine on it, that its whole purpose is to provide air pressure, like a compressor, only a lot of it.
Oh, okay.
And it has a hose that's maybe 6 inches across in diameter, and you connect that to the starter on the plane, and then the small jet engine pumps air through there into the starter motor
Right.
on the engine, and it cranks the engine with that. And then
Oh.
once it gets up to a certain RPM, you flip on the fuel, and you've already flipped on the ignition, and you just turn on the fuel, and it starts.
And you disconnect this
And
thing.
then you disconnect the.
And run like hell?
Well, no. As soon as you see it, as soon as you see the engine catch, you'll see the heat come out the tailpipe,
Yeah.
and then the pilot will wave off that you can disconnect it, and then you shut the engine down on the cart
On the cart.
and disconnect the hose. And you also have electric plugged into the side from another power unit, and you disconnect that and move them back a ways, and then he warms it up, checks everything, and then you pull the chocks, and away he goes.
Yeah. Huh. So you don't just get in there and turn the key in?
No,
Give
you
the
don't.
gas?
No keys.
No keys?
There may be today,
Yeah,
but there was
wasn't
no
that.
keys then.
Oh, gosh. So, anything interesting happen, or any experiences in Iceland?
Well, it was a good part and a bad part. The bad part was one of our pilots was flying one of these F-102s, and again we had these rocks out there, and it was cloudy, really low clouds, and they were practicing maneuvers, and he came out of the clouds too low and hit the rocks.
Ooh.
And the plane was almost full of fuel. It just went up, and they didn't find. The parts of the airplane were very small. Wheels and things were intact, but sheet metal and things were
Just blown apart.
And they found very little of him. It was just, he was scattered all over the place.
Yeah.
That was tragic. And then one of the fun things, we wanted to get a picture, the troops, the maintenance guys, wanted to get a picture of one of these F-102s to take home with us, in Afterburner.
Yeah.
And the afterburner is basically boosts the horsepower of the engine by about 50%. But it basically shoots a fire stream out the tailpipe, maybe 30 feet long.
So you guys wanted to
We
paint a
wanted to-
picture with this afterburner?
With the afterburner lit and get a picture of it. So, and it had to be in dark, so it would show up on the picture, or almost dark.
Right.
Enough so the fire would show up, but you could tell what the plane was.
Yeah.
So we got it, but we just our boss had a run-up license for the engine, so he could taxi the airplane and from one spot to another. So, and if there was an engine problem, he could fire it up for the technician that would maybe adjust something. And so he got he had his uniform on, of course, and his hat, but we weren't allowed to wear hats around airplanes, even though you're supposed to wear a hat because it could be sucked down the intake, and then you've got a problem with the engine. So, and you weren't supposed to carry anything in your pockets, anything metal that could come out, be sucked out of your pockets, or you know, nothing, no pens, nothing like that.
Right.
You could wear a ring, but you weren't encouraged to do that either. So he fired the airplane up, and he had his hat on. He brought his little skull cap, and he brought his scarf. So he had a scarf like one of these World War I pieces, you know.
Yeah.
And he started the airplane, moved it out, and turned it so it was facing down the ramp. So there was nothing in front of him. And now you got to understand that these engines are pretty powerful, and when it's an afterburner, you cannot hold it with the brakes. It will not. It'll slide the tires. It's so powerful. And in fact, it's tough to hold it just in 100% RPM. You know, at wide open.
Yeah.
Pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
You can barely hold it with the brakes. At an afterburner, it starts jumping the tires.
Yeah. Now this is all for this picture that you guys
All
want.
for this picture. So he fired it up, moved it out there, and now next door, maybe 500 feet away, there's an administration building. A lot of officers working in there. The tailpipe's pointing right to their building, so they're going to get a good, nice big boom. And when this thing kicks in, it really booms. It's like thunder.
Yeah.
And so he pulled it out there, got it straight, got the brakes on, ran the engine up, popped it in afterburner. We got the picture, and he pulled it back out of afterburner, taxied around and parked it. And even though it's like 30 degrees out there, or less, windows started going up in this building. We were looking out to see what the noise was. It was unusual, you know, for around there. So it was, we could have gotten in big trouble.
Yeah.
We got our picture.
Yeah.
And it didn't hurt anything.
Was this just before you were leaving Iceland, or?
No, it was probably
Mid.
around mid-time, about 6 months, 8 months.
Now you were there for just a year. This was one of those kind of bad places to be, so it was a short tour of duty.
Yeah, it was considered, not sure it was considered remote, but it was a 1-year tour, and it was remote.
So, at the end of the year, did you get to go home to see your son and wife? And
yeah.
How long did you?
Well, you can take whatever leave you have. You can take part or all of it. So you could take 3 days if you wanted to. The minimum you could take would be the amount of time that it will take you to get from wherever you are to your new assignment, and that's not counted as leave time. So they give you 3 to 5 travel days, or 8 to 10 travel days, whatever it takes. And then your vacation or leave time that you take is added on to that. So if you don't want to take leave, then that's fine. You can just have those 3 to 5 days or whatever they give you, whatever they allow you, and you're paid, of course, for that, just like you're working, same as if you're working. So I usually took 30 days because you get 30 days a year. So I took 30 days, and I think I had more than that saved up, but I just took 30. And we had, I think, 5 days travel time. And my next assignment was Hill Air Force Base in Utah. And so we drove out.
So now your wife and child could be with you.
Yes.
In Utah.
Yes.
So, okay, good.
And, yeah, so we were there from the time, I don't remember the dates exactly, I'd have to look them up. But from the time we got there until I was discharged, we stayed at Hill.
So that was your last assignment?
And it was a bomber outfit. It wasn't a fighter type aircraft that I'd been working on. It was a bomber that had been converted to electronic warfare. So they weren't really set up for bombs, they were jamming devices, for jamming radar, and they were actually used to test our defenses against foreign planes. So they would pretend they were the enemy. That's what the whole squadron was for, was to see if they could infiltrate. Yes.
They were...
Yeah. So they were B-57s, and we would take TDYs, or temporary duties, somewhere, depending on what the operation was going to be. Like one time we went to Bermuda, and we flew. There were 3 outfits scattered around the United States that were locked into this job, and we flew all of the planes that were going to participate in this mission to Bermuda over a period of a week or so. And fortunately, our group went in the last day before the operation started, or otherwise we'd have been down there for a week.
Oh.
So we were the last ones to arrive. And we flew down on a transport plane, and the 2 pilots would fly, well, the pilot and the jamming officer flew the plane down. And I think we probably took 20 planes down there. And the other groups brought all of theirs that they were going to use. And then they all just took off and flew on these missions. So we were the ground crew, of course, so we spent, I think it was a day and a half, 2.5 days, and we didn't leave the runway. I never got off the runway the whole time I was there, because all we did was service planes and keep them flying. And when they come back, if they had tire change or whatever, and fuel them up, and brake changes or whatever you had to do, whatever was written up on them as a problem,
This is
you
like
had
a
to fix it.
24-hour day job for 2 days, and so 48 hours you just basically kept working?
Yeah.
You
So
had the cat nap or something
if you
right
got
there?
time to take a nap, you just sat down on the ramp beside your plane, maybe leaned back on the tire and dozed. And then we came home.
Yeah.
But they basically bombed New York City.
Yeah.
So they flew out and they ran their jamming radar and stuff, and then the real guys that were going to bomb were only maybe, do this play bombing, were only 2 or 3 planes. But by the time you do it so that all the fighter jets that are protecting the shores would scramble up, and they can only fly for a certain amount of time, then you have to go back and refuel and fix any problems. So then they would send in another wave of planes, and some more fighters would come up.
Did everybody understand that this was a drill, or was this something to test the, the fighter planes that went up in response to the...
Yeah, because their job is to scramble up and protect their...
But they understood that this was a drill?
Pretty much,
Pretty much.
Yeah. And I don't know if they were involved in it, but their job as defense would be to make sure nobody gets in. So, and once they would catch up with this plane, they would see, okay, now we know what it is.
I see.
And it's electronic warfare, because they know what the planes are like. Well, they had 40 antennas sticking out of the bottom of the plane, so they, for jamming, so they would know right away what was going on.
Yeah.
So I think part of it was a surprise, but they knew it was coming, just not when.
Yeah.
And then when they would, so all these planes then, these interceptors were back on the ground, no fuel, and with maybe tire changes waiting or whatever. And then the 2 or 3 that were really going to bomb New York City just came in and bombed New York City.
Yeah. Electronically.
So that's what they did. That was fun. It was an interesting job. And then we made the decision to get out because, mostly because I was sick of overseas tours, starting a family, I had taken an aptitude test, and it said that I should get into computer work. And all things balanced out, and we decided to, that the best thing was just to get out. And
Because you said 8 years then.
yes.
Were there like 2 4-year tours of duty, or
Yes.
when
2 4 years.
It was 2 4 years.
Mhm.
So you had an opportunity here was either to get out or to re-enlist for another 4 years. That the
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can enlist 4 years at a time.
Mhm.
That's the most and the least.
Mhm.
So if you enlist, then you're in there for 4 more.
Mhm.
You can't change your mind
Right.
once you sign the paper.
Right.
And I wanted to use, I needed to go to college, but I wanted to use my skills that I had until I started this school.
Mhm.
So what I did was, I started to work at the base the day after I was discharged from the service, because they overhauled planes from the Vietnam War. The F-4s that were being shot up in Vietnam, they would bring them in there to this hangar in Utah, fly them in, or bring them in on a truck, or however they could get them there, and we would put them back together.
So they hired civilian mechanics.
Yes.
Because at this
Yeah.
point you were a civilian mechanic. Of course, they knew your training and everything. You just gotten out of the Air Force.
Yeah,
but-
and I actually interviewed for the job in fatigues. I just got on tug and drove it down the ramp and stopped and went in and interviewed, and they said, "We can't hire you, you're military." And I said, "Yeah, but not next week, I will be."
Oh.
And so they went ahead and interviewed me then.
Oh, good.
But,
Good.
and then I went back to work
Yeah.
in the Air Force part.
Yeah.
And I worked there just over a year. Long enough to see one plane that came back from Vietnam, just shot full of holes. And no landing gear, no wings, and we flew it out. We rebuilt it completely
Rebuilt it,
from
yeah.
scratch, and flew it out in less than a year.
Wow.
And it just sat there for a long time, waiting for parts,
Right.
waiting for this, waiting for that. And finally, they started
and
putting it together.
Yeah.
And they'd work on it for a while, and then it would sit there for a while, and they'd work on it again. So it was an expensive plane, so they had
Sure.
to fix it if they could. So.
So then, you said you stayed at that for about a year?
About a year.
About a year
And,
doing that.
and then I came back. We came back here.
And you started school, or?
Yeah, went to college at Corning Community.
Now, is this did you benefit from the GI Bill?
Yes.
Is that?
Yeah, they paid for the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, that was good.
And at that time, there was enough. The GI Bill was big enough. The checks, were sufficient for school
Right.
plus a little extra, to pay for your gas to get there. And
Right.
and then I worked part-time at the gas station pumping gas too. And I worked at Schweitzer Aircraft for a while.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh,
So that helped.
yeah. And then, so you got your associates?
Got my associates at Corning, and I went to Elmira College. I actually got a job at Elmira College after
Yeah, I kind of remember
after
that.
Corning.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so after the military, you got your associates from Corning.
Associates from Corning.
And
then
then,
I applied for a job at Elmira College, and was accepted.
And this is all in computer.
Yeah, I was actually a computer operator there. That was my first job, and I worked there for I think around 2 years. And then at the same time, I started taking classes, because the classes were $3 a semester.
Because you were an employee.
You had to, yes, because you had to pay an activity fee.
Yeah.
And then if you needed a book, you'd have to buy that. But the classes and the tuition and everything are free. And most of the time you could pick up a book because you got to know the instructors. So you could pick up a book. So I basically got my degree for about 75 cents a credit.
That's good.
And in the middle of that, I actually worked at Elmira twice. I got a job as an operator over at Cornell. And I worked in the animal science lab for year and a half.
That was
to a
still
year and a half.
computer
Still computer
related,
operated.
yeah. That was a nighttime job, if I remember
Yes,
correct, wasn't it?
nighttime
For
job.
a year and a half, yeah.
And then one day the woman that I worked with at Elmira the first time called me and asked me if I wanted to come back. And the wages weren't very good the first time I worked there. But she offered me, they were able to spend more money the second time, and so I did go back. And I stayed there until I, almost by accident, got the job at Corning Incorporated, and then I stayed there 22 years.
At Corning?
At Corning,
Really, was that long?
yeah,
Wow,
22 years.
yeah. But you had gotten your bachelor's then from Elmira
Yes.
College, and you had completed that while you were working there.
Yes.
So did you have to use the GI Bill then as well, or was it just because you were an employee that it was so much better?
I really don't remember if there was any GI Bill left by the time I went to Elmira College, because I think I used almost all of it up over the 2 years I went to Corning. Because I went to summer school as well. I needed more math background than I had from high school, and so I had to take extra math classes. So it put me into taking classes year round to catch up, get everything done. That was a pretty rigorous course, much tougher than Elmira was later on. So I think I used almost all of my GI Bill at Corning.
Had you kept in touch with anybody, any of your fellow airmen, Air Force people that you were?
There's two people I know, and I haven't talked to one of them since then, since I knew him in Scott Air Force Base. And my wife, of course, was there, and she knew him. We went to parties and visited back and forth and all that, so she knows him too. And but we send cards. We still send cards and letters every year at Christmas time. And then the other person is a guy I met in training in Amarillo, and he wasn't in our group, but he was from New York, and so I met him somehow, and we became friends. And he went to Okinawa as well a week or so before I did, and I guess they were changing a lot of orders for people to go there, and they grabbed him too. And his name is Charles Dusenberry. And then there's another guy that was there that I actually bought that motorcycle from. And he's living down south now, and he's not in very good condition. His last name was Towson, James Towson, Towson, I believe. And I talked to him on the phone once. A year or so ago, and I hadn't seen him in years, 30 years. And Dusenberry was a closer friend, and we've been in communication off and on for the whole time. And he lives in Bath. His family lives in Bath. His dad lives over there, and so he lives in where's the city that had the bomb a few years ago?
The bomb.
Where McVeigh blew up the building.
Oh, Oklahoma City.
Yeah, he lives near there.
Near there.
And he actually lived in Oklahoma City when it happened, but he's since moved slightly out. So he lives there, and he married a woman from Elmira, or from Bath, but then they were divorced, and he's married again, and I've never met his new wife. So. But those are the only ones that I've really kept track of.
So around Christmas time, you usually send a letter?
Yeah, and with Charles, with Chuck, we send emails all the time. Even I got one from him last week, so just with jokes or whatever, just something he's seen about the military or something he'll send to me, and I'll laugh back with him.
So, do you have any thoughts or kind of in retrospective about your military experience, what it's meant to you, how it's impacted your life, or
Yeah, I think one of the things about the service is, especially the enlisted people, I think it's really tough for them to be, after they get out of the service. Because of the way the military treats you. And again, it probably would depend on what career field you got
Mhm.
into.
Mhm.
Like if you got into computers, it wouldn't be the same
Mhm.
as it was for me in the aircraft field, because you don't get this leadership training so much
Mhm.
until you get up in the higher ranks. So if you stay in the military for your entire career, 20 or 30 years,
Mhm.
then eventually you'll become manager, or chief, whatever. And you get those leadership skills, but
Mhm.
if you don't get them,
Mhm.
and you certainly don't get them in college,
Mhm.
so you're kind of shortchanged almost.
Mhm.
So, but I think it should be a requirement
To be in.
to be in the military
Yeah.
for at least 2 years. Every male and female
Yeah.
should do it.
I was going to ask you if you felt the same way about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because of the discipline and
It turned a lot of kids around that way.
you get a better focus on
Yeah.
your life and maybe what you should be doing with it.
Yeah, it gives you a chance to, especially if you get to choose what you want to do
Mhm.
while you're in there. If you do get that, you're going to sign up for longer because they want to get their money back from the school.
Right.
You would hardly be out of school and trained on the job within 2 years. So, and you wouldn't have time to pay them back. But if you get to choose what you want to do, especially if you can pick a career that you can use once you get out,
Mhm.
then it's a golden opportunity.
Right.
Something we shouldn't miss. And it's not that tough. Anybody can do it.
Yeah. Especially in the Air Force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always, my favorite joke is the Army's, I believe it's the Army, is the be all you can be. So this guy goes in and he says, I want to do this, and they say, okay, fine. And then he enlists, and then they say, okay, now you're a cook.
Yeah.
And that's not what I wanted. He says, well, that's all you can be.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
No,
Can you
can't think of anything.
any more humorous stories or that you dare tell?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, that's fine. Well, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, very good. So we can, you get a copy to you. I actually got the off button here.